Wow, I didn't expect cheers. That's a nice way to start the morning. I'll take it. Yeah. So good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. So our topic today is innovate now, secure later. Raise your hand if you think that's a good idea. That's right. You don't, right? Because you're security people. You know how critical securing things are. So why is the Chief Operating Officer of IBM Consulting standing here today talking about this? Well, because it matters. It really matters to us, right? We've got over 100,000 consultants doing projects for companies. And we can't do that. We can't innovate today and then secure later. Our clients will be at jeopardy. So we have to secure as we go. So we've started a pretty sizable initiative to do exactly that. And so what we're going to do today is, I'll talk a little bit about it, but then Srini is going to talk about the things that you actually have to secure, because one of the biggest problems is actually knowing what to secure in this new Gen AI world. And then Ryan's going to show you the framework that we were using internally to secure all of our Gen AI projects. And we have a lot of them. We're doing about 300 Gen AI projects for clients. And we can't just innovate, we have to secure. I'm going to give you an example. So we're doing this one project, we've done it, for a hospital chain. And any of you ever cancel an appointment when you go to a hospital like the day before? Raise your hand if that's happened. There we go. So this is actually not that uncommon. And then hospitals have these empty slots. And so we've used some AI technology to be able to communicate with the patients more effectively and also schedule more effectively. So now this hospital chain can actually serve 700 patients more every week. That's really great, right? Hopefully you think that's great, we think that's great, the hospital think that's great, et cetera. But think about it. If we just innovate and gave them the solution, but it's not really secure, that's a huge problem, right? And that's the scenario that I think a lot of us are facing, a lot of you as security professionals are actually facing. And I'll show you some data. It's actually tough data, because what your executives want to do and what you know are the right thing to do are not exactly aligned. So let me, so here's some data. So IBM Consulting and AWS, one of our premier partners, did a study. This is over 1,000 CXOs. And 82% of these C-suite execs stated that secure and trustworthy AI is essential to success of their business. That's great. So they want it secure, they want it trustworthy. But then 69% of them say, you know what? Innovation takes precedence over security. Raise your hand if any of you are experiencing this today. Aha, okay. So we're not surprised. And it's even worse. And only 24% are securing their Gen AI projects. And one of the things that comes out of this study is sort of all the way at the bottom here, where it says 47% of people are actually uncertain about what it is you've got to secure and how much to invest in it, right? So yesterday, I was talking to a CISO, two CISOs actually, one at a bank and one at a very, very large retail company, sort of a consumer goods company that manufactures a lot. And the one from the bank says, oh, we have this problem. We really should talk, and we'd love to hear some best practices of what you're doing. And then the other one said, hey, you know what we're doing is we've got these great security frameworks, these guidelines. We're just going to apply them better. And that, I tell you, that is not going to be sufficient because there are new threats that are upon us, threats that are just different, right? Because of the nature of Gen AI. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Srini, who's going to explain what those threats are, and then Ryan, who's going to talk about the framework for managing them.
Thanks, Mohammed. Good morning, everybody. So this 24%, let's zero into that. I see that as an opportunity statement for us security practitioners because 76% of the people did not even factor in the projects. So what do we do about it? We as security practitioners can have that healthy conversation with our CEOs and CXOs to say, we can help you to secure this innovation. So the answer to the exam question here is, it's not about innovate or secure, it's innovate and secure by design. Over the course of this discussion, we will show you what the exposures are, how you can remediate those exposures and attacks using the conventional technologies that you already have, and you may have to bring in some new technologies and new controls because you have to guard against the novel attacks. So we'll show you that as well. Okay? So let's take a macro point of view here. This is a research activity. At IBM, we did this research activity, and the researchers said that the attackers or the bad actors will be leveraging AI to attack, and they will also attack the AI models. Okay? So to establish that what it means by attacking the AI models or AI applications, we define it as two consumption models. One, you as an AI consumer, you are using any AI application that is developed. It could be AI as a service, something like ChatGPT, you're just consuming it, right? So you're not developing or building the models. Or your business units will be developing models or fine-tuning the models, and you are consuming it as an AI application. So as security practitioners, we have the responsibility to secure both. What does that mean? AI is opening up new attack surface. Okay? When you have that new attack surface, there will be new strategies, for example, a model evasion attack. You can trick a car to not stop at a stop sign by just changing the format of the stop sign or blocking some of the information there. That's a model evasion attack. So you need to know how to detect and prevent that from happening. So that's a new attack type, and we have to have new methodologies to do that. Prompt injection attacks. Most of you know about the jailbreaking of prompts. There's a Dan prompt, do anything now. What does that mean? A bad actor can write a series of content in the prompt and trick the model not to follow the guardrails that the creator has created as part of that AI. Now with that, the bad actor can extract the data, can have the model behave in a different way than what it was intended for. Okay? And the third one is models and the applications will have vulnerabilities. Bad actors will incorporate malicious code or backdoors into the models and post them onto repositories. So when you're taking those models and those applications, they will inherently have vulnerabilities and exposures, and bad actors at a later time will access those things and do nefarious activities on your environment. You have to have novel methods to detect and prevent it. Now, in terms of using the attackers or the bad actors, how they use AI is they will have generative AI help them to create better spam content, okay, or deepfake attacks. I was able to create a voice clone, a deepfake, with $1 and within 10 minutes. I'm not a hacker. I've never done that. This is the first time that I attempted it, and I was able to do it. It was very decent, right? But it's only $1. What if somebody has $1 million, they can actually clone voices of heads of countries? They're already happening right now, okay? So the entry barrier has lowered. There will be more bad actors coming into this area to leverage these AI tools to create bad activity and to attack corporations and community and government at large. There will also be very tailored phishing attacks. Okay? Spam content has been there for a while, but what we used to do as part of the spam content is we used to observe those grammatical errors, spelling mistakes. Right? With AI content available now, they can be very good. So our mindset has to change about what the grammar and the spelling errors were. Right? Instead of looking at that, we have to think about it's too good. This is well constructed, very good conversational. So we got to change our mindset of our detection approach there. Okay? Attackers will adapt to evading any of the defensives. So this will be a cat and mouse game. It'll be faster. It'll be more complicated. So we got to be up to the challenge. So we as defenders have to be up to the challenge. So that was the theoretical sense that we established and say, here are the 6 points. But why is the urgency? Why are we here and talking about innovate or secure? Because the attacks and the exposures are already happening. These are the ones, it's a very short list, these are the ones that hit the press. You probably noticed those things. Due to a cloud misconfiguration, there was terabytes of training data that was exposed. That could have been exfiltrated, or that data could have been poisoned. Okay? And the models would have learned from the poisoned data, thereby giving incorrect results and rising to bias issues and hallucinations. There was a DDoS attack that happened on a large AI service provider. It caused outages. It caused availability issues. Okay? What this also means is it's not only about the security aspects of it, it's also making the development of AI that expensive, because all of this AI is being run on those GPU farms, which is very, very expensive and scarce at the moment. Okay? There is a third one, which is a pre-release code of a large electronics company. A developer submitted that pre-release code to assess the application quality. That code is out there. AI has learned from it. A bad actor could go in and extract that information. Okay? So there are a list of these things, and I'll just talk about last one and then move into the solution part of it. A finance worker was tricked to transfer $25 million. Such is the impact and the effectiveness of deepfakes. More and more things will happen like this. Okay? There have been situations where robocalls of a president of a nation were made during an election time, and the robocall said, don't go vote. That has huge implications on democracy and society at large. Okay? Such is the issue. And we, as the defenders, we have to come together to find solutions to remediate these exposures. What is the answer? What we are recommending here is threefold. The DDoS attacks that have happened on this large AI provider, those are conventional attacks. We know how to protect against DDoS attacks. We could use cloud-based services, or we could use data center-based services to protect us against DDoS attacks. Understand what your AI application is doing, how it is exposed to the internet, have your existing controls up. Do the additional configurations, do the additional signatures within the technology, and have it configured to protect against DDoS attacks. That can be done today. You don't need any new things. Right? The second thing is the conventional attacks will take new meaning. What does it mean? The cloud misconfiguration that happened, that's a cloud security posture management issue. The exposures, we know about those exposures already. So what we do is we got to now understand where the training data set is, where the models are, what sensitive data is there, who is accessing that, what configurations are available, and enhance the configuration levels. Okay? So it's conventional attacks. There are conventional technologies that are available. You can apply them today. The third one is about new attacks. We talked about the prompt injection attacks, the deepfake analysis. Those are, we will need new technologies to do that. Okay? So we talked about consumers. We as consumers, we are consuming AI. We are also help building the models and the AI applications. So that's there's a data science team or the application team is doing it. As security practitioners, we are protecting the environment across the board. So we will now come into a solution for the latter thing, where about AI is being built by our organization, and how do we help the pipeline. So this is how we define the AI pipeline, and Ryan will talk more about this pipeline and how to secure and protect it. So you have three things here. As part of the AI pipeline, there is a data collection and management phase. So that's your training data set preparation. There's model development and model inference use. That's how we are consuming the AI through those applications. But there are exposures and attack possibilities by bad actors at exfiltrating the sensitive data poisoning possibilities, accessing the vulnerabilities through the applications or the models, and attacking the AI itself. And the third one is during the usage, through the prompts, how to hijack the prompts or cause Dan prompt, for example, jailbreaking into it and cause nefarious activities there. So with that, I'll hand over to Ryan to talk more about the framework and how to build secure models here.
Great. Thank you, Srini. Yeah, so how do we go about securing generative AI from all the risks and attacks that Srini just spoke about? Well, as Mohammed mentioned, half of organizations don't know where to start or how much to invest when it comes to securing generative AI. I think the other challenge too is organizations trying to, get through the FUD to the reality, right? Just because something's possible isn't likely. So what IBM did, we published a framework this year on securing generative AI. And as Srini was pointing out, it starts at the top with data collection and handling, model development and training, model inference and live use. And what it does is it describes the top defensive approaches to prioritize across the likeliest risks and attacks across the AI pipeline. And what we recommend is very simply, you got to do a number of things. One is secure the data, secure the model, secure the usage, and then underpinning it all is securing the infrastructure. You need to protect the foundation upon which the AI systems are being run. And then you need to establish governance across the life cycle, monitor for things like bias, drift, et cetera. And so we're going to get into each one in a little bit more detail in terms of where we see the likeliest attacks across these different pillars and then the recommended defensive approaches. And so within the data collection and handling, so what's happening is AI needs to be trained on very powerful data sources in order to deliver on its promises. And so critical IP like product designs, internal code bases, engineering logs, very powerful proprietary and crown jewel data for years that have been locked away in the most secure systems are now being brought to the surface and connected to these AI systems for training. And so what we're seeing is that this provides a very rich target for attackers to exfiltrate because it's a huge pile of one sensitive, very centralized sensitive data. And so again, very, very appealing to attackers. Now, the other thing too is, as Srini pointed out, the data leakage that can occur and the data exfiltration as a result. And so what we recommend in this phase of the pipeline is really focusing on data security and identity and access management fundamentals. To Srini's point, these are very conventional solutions. These are things that organizations have today, things that they're doing today. This is not net new when it comes to securing generative AI. To Srini's point earlier, you need to put data discovery and classification, understand what types of sensitive data is being used where to train these models, making sure that you're protecting it at rest and in transit through encryption, making sure you're tracking the data lineage, making sure that you're using user behavior analytics to see where there might be insider risk or access by third parties. And then from an identity and access management perspective, making sure that you're locking down control for least privilege to these very centralized sources of sensitive data. And then certainly last but not least, make sure you're doing security awareness and training of non-security practitioners like the data science and researchers, and making sure that they're working closely with the security teams to have the necessary controls and guardrails in place. And here's an example of what happens when those types of things are not followed, right? This is, again, data scientists and researchers rolling this data together. They're putting it in shared repositories. It's not being locked down. The necessary access controls aren't there. I think organizations don't really understand where this data is being housed and what type of sensitive data is in there. In this case, fortunately, the researchers at Wiz were able to discover this exposure and notify the organization before exfiltration can happen. But to Srini's point, this is where AI introduces new risks based upon organizational adoption, broader adoption of AI within the organization. But again, conventional type of risk that can be handled by conventional type of security solutions, and is one area where we recommend that organizations start. The other thing that was in that repository were models used for training. And so supply chain attacks on models, create new risks, introduce new vulnerabilities within the AI pipeline. And a lot of this is being born out of the fact that organizations just don't have the skills and resources to build their own LLMs. And so what they're doing is they're leveraging these open source pre-trained models, they're downloading it from model sharing repositories, and then using that to accelerate AI application development. That's all great, but security controls aren't really being followed within a lot of these model repositories, and attackers have the same access to these model sharing repositories that organizations do. And so what we've seen is the ability for attackers to simply download these open source pre-trained models, Trojanize them with backdoors or malware, re-upload them for any unsuspecting customer to then come down and download that next model and introduce supply chain risks within the organization. And one of the challenges too is because a lot of these are black box models, if you don't understand how an output becomes an input, or an input becomes an output, I should say, like how are you going to understand if a model's been compromised, right? And the other aspect to this is also API attacks, because again, that's going to be one of the consumption models of organizations that don't build their own LLMs are going to consume the capabilities through APIs and ability for attackers to exploit those and exfiltrate data that way. And then last but not least, privilege escalation. So what's happening is researchers are training these LLM agents to autonomously perform business functions within the organization. And this is what we mean when we talk about generative AI being embedded deeply within the fabric of business. But these agents have tremendous amount of privileges, and the ability to then exploit those excessive permissions for attackers to gain access to downstream systems is another exfiltration point, or exploit point, I should say. And so what do we tell, or what do we recommend in this phase? Again, this is a mix of conventional versus new AI-specific defenses. On the conventional side, again, it's API security, making sure you're doing the API discovery and hardening those API integrations to these third-party models. The AI-specific solution, and then also identity and access management to make sure you're doing least privilege access control for these LLM agents and making sure that no one person or thing has access to everything that the model can do. On the new AI-specific solutions coming to market are the model scanners, where they continuously scan models for vulnerabilities, and then you can combine red teaming, whether automatic red teaming or use services for pen testing these models on a regular basis to ensure their security. And then again, an example of what can happen when you don't do these things. And again, this is just to show that these are things that we are seeing in the wild. These were researchers from Hidden Layer that were able to prove that they could download a model from an open source model repository, Trojanize it, and re-upload it for download for the next unsuspecting consumer. And then with model inferencing and live usage, we've seen model evasion and prompt injection being able to trick models to provide misleading results or to expose sensitive data. And so the challenge here is that what this really is just a new AI spin on malicious injection attacks, right? It's an age-old application security problem. But in the past, these injection attacks were done using structured language. With LLMs using natural language, it's much more difficult and challenging to determine what's a good input from a bad input. And so what we recommend here is you see new solutions coming to market under the name or the banner of AI detection and response, machine learning detection and response, an example being last year's winner of the sandbox competition. So we recommend organizations begin to pilot these types of solutions so that they can continuously monitor for these types of attacks on models. And one of the challenges too is that it's not a very sophisticated type of attack. It doesn't take a lot of skill or sophistication. The researchers at Carnegie Mellon and the AI Institute for Advanced Safety were able to do this by simply appending a string of characters at the end, and kind of acted like a buffer overflow, where the security program was disabled based upon just making the program overwrite its memory buffer, right? And then other ways are, let's play a game, or disregard your past previous instructions, or being able to simply use synonyms to kind of mask the intent of what you're trying to do. And so this is a challenging problem that hasn't been solved, which is the reason why these types of solutions become more important. so that you can continuously monitor for these types of AI-specific attacks on the models. And then the good news, though, here is that a lot of them will then integrate with your SOC, your SIEM, your EDR tools. These alerts can then be sent to those teams to be able to do responsive actions like block access to the model, quarantine the model, or worst case scenario, just disable the model altogether. And then, as I mentioned too, making sure as a first line of defense, secure the underlying infrastructure. And again, this is another area where organizations can start immediately to begin securing their generative AI initiatives. They have the expertise, the tools to build in security controls and defense against things like hardening their network security, network access control, intrusion detection and response, while also investing in some of these new AI-specific solutions that have come to market. And then with emerging regulations and public scrutiny of responsible AI, it's important that we embed very robust governance across the pipeline as well to make sure that you're monitoring and managing for accuracy, privacy, explainability, and trustworthiness of the AI models. And then also on that one, it was also important that security teams and governance teams more closely align and integrate. Historically, they've been relatively two separate functions. So in this world, we need to make sure that they get more closely aligned and work more closely together. So I talked a lot of ways that we talked about in terms of things that can be used to secure generative AI. But one of the interesting things that came out of the report, Mohammed, was that securing generative AI, one of the things that is needed is what organizations have least of. So can you talk a little bit more about what we mean by that?
Sure. All right, thank you, Ryan. So, there are kind of two scenarios here, right? One where you're training a model, and maybe not too many of you are doing that. And then the other is when you're inferencing to models, right? And so of our 300 projects that we're doing for clients, the bulk of them are in the second category. But either of these scenarios, right, whether we're training a model for a sovereign government because they want their own model, we have to employ these techniques. Otherwise, we could have issues. And same sort of thing when we're doing inferencing like that hospital, we have to employ these. So in some ways, we started creating this because we just needed it in consulting. We have these 100,000 people that are out there building these solutions for clients. We have to do it in a secure way. But as Ryan was suggesting, partnerships are super important in security. I think unlike most other industries, security is in particular a team sport. And let me give you an example. So I was at this very senior briefing with the FBI, and this very senior FBI person came up to me, and we were talking about threat signals. And he said, yeah, if we had all the threat signals, we'd be able, we'd be able to fight this stuff better. And so he says to me, there's this one company that have this massive trove of threat signals, and what they are charging me to buy those signals is just too much. I can't afford it. And then another agent came up and he said, hey, sometimes I feel like there's a murderer out there, and somebody in the room knows who the murderer is, but they want to charge me a ton of money that I can't afford to tell me who it is, right? So, in security, we haven't always partnered well. Going forward, we really are going to have to. And so, at IBM Consulting, we've been working very closely with AWS that I mentioned earlier, Palo Alto, Microsoft, others, around this idea that in this new age of Gen AI powered attacks and Gen AI vulnerabilities, we're going to have to work closer together. So, from the threat point of view to the technology point of view, which this chart, the lower right hand, talks about the expertise, to things like how do you explain to your CEO that there's ROI in this, right? I think for all of us, it's going to be a network of partners to be able to fight this effectively, right? Whether it's the technology providers like Microsoft or IBM or others, or it's the consulting partners like us, the boutique specialists. Like, we're going to have to get better at this team sport. Otherwise, the bad guys are going to divide and conquer, right? So, I'm going to turn it back over to Srini for some final comments. But I do want to say that I feel like we're in yet another new era with security. I recently rejoined IBM. I was CEO of a security company and some other things. But I have to say that in my 30 years, it's like it just gets more and more dangerous in our space, right? And I think we have to work together. Okay.
So, Tim, to summarize the conversation here, we went through a journey of cloud. Cloud security was an afterthought. We went through a journey of DevOps. DevSecOps came later. At this time, when we're talking about AI and applications being developed on top of AI, let's come to the front and have this developed securely. These are the different attacks that can happen. There is a huge risk out there. There's impact and the attack difficulty. Yes, over a period of time, these attack difficulties will reduce. As I talked about, the entry barrier is lowered. Let's have a proper operations model, proper governance on how we are consuming AI and how we are building AI. So that's number one. Number two is about this framework that Ryan talked about. Okay. Have a seat at the table. We security practitioners should be part of the governance, overall AI governance, so that we can help the teams to understand the exposures, to help them remediate those exposures. Because we know with using conventional technologies and new technologies, we can go through those layers, securing the infrastructure, as Ryan was mentioning about you can take existing technologies, securing the data, securing the models, and the usage, and the inferences, and the applications. How do we go about doing it? Mohammed mentioned about let's leverage partners. One single company or an individual cannot do this all. Let's leverage the strength of the partnership. So what we are hoping you'll take from this particular session is, within the next few weeks, okay, should be able to identify, inventory all your AI consumption, whether it's consumption of ChatGPT or Azure AI or something, and say, what is the current security posture of that? And using the existing technologies, conventional technologies, can you enhance that cloud security posture management so that data leak will not happen, that misconfiguration is identified and you're preventing it upfront? Second thing, and again, you want partners, please take support from partners. In the next three months, you should be able to discover the data. What is that training data set that is being developed? What is that sensitive data that is part of the training data set? Do the data discovery, data classification, who is accessing that data, which model is using, establish the data lineage, establish the model lineage, provide security controls using the conventional technologies. You may need some new technologies as well for deepfake detection or prompt injection. There are technologies available. Again, take the help of a partner to help you with that. And within 6 months, should be able to be at the table of this overall corporate AI governance, help the team to understand the risks and the exposures, and help them to properly govern the AI models and the data. Okay? So with that, again, I'm repeating the answer to the exam question here is, it's not about innovate or secure, it's about innovation and secure by design. Okay? Ryan, your closing comments?
No, I think we'll just open up for questions and answers. I think Srini made it point well. I think we've all understood that, again, generative AI is being embedded deeply into the fabric of business, and security can't be an afterthought. Right? So as a team, let's go ahead and make sure we ensure that generative AI is being adopted securely and responsibly.
Mohammed, your closing comments?
Nope, nothing more. I think you guys said it all. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we do have examples on those things. So we will not names, but as a SaaS provider, certain SaaS providers, not everybody. Right? For example, somebody who's supporting customer relationship management, etc. They took the necessary steps to inspect the data, govern the data, right, properly, and they train the models with trusted data. At IBM, we've done that. We are supported by our Chief Privacy Officer and our Chief Data Officer to establish an AI Ethics Council, and all the AI projects will be run through that. Okay? So there is an established model, and we are extracting that experience. And as Mohammed was mentioning about the strength of the partners, that's how we are taking that experience and bringing it to our clients. So there is one example of a company like IBM or some other service providers that have done things right. Now, there are others, you have your own opinion about the other service models where they learned from open data and did not validate and verify the data quality first, right? And thereby it's causing the problems in terms of hallucination, accuracy issues, and biases.
Yeah. Hey, maybe I could just add to that. So, I think just like cloud, it's sort of a multi-cloud world. And this is going to be a multi-model world. And depending on the risk that for your use case, you may opt for one model versus the other model because this model has more capability or it has lower cost or whatever, right? So if you're doing an application that's not that sensitive, you could use a model where that's not as big a concern. But if you have a use case, like we work a lot with banks and healthcare companies, some of their use cases are extraordinarily sensitive. And so we will want to use a model that was built in a much more careful way for that use case. And so, at least our approach in IBM Consulting is we sort of use all the models, right? We use Llama 3, we use GPT, we use IBM Watson Granite, et cetera, Amazon Bedrock. And then what we try to do is we trade off depending on your use case scenario, because cost is also very important now, right? Like there's, for example, if you want to ingest a 90-minute video and summarize it, there are like very few of these LLMs that could do it. But if your use case is a smaller thing, like writing that email, that message to that patient in a nice way to find out if they're actually going to show up for the appointment, you don't need that expensive underlying model, right? And so just the same way I just described how we're doing the cost trade-off of these models, you're also going to do the risk trade-offs. And so, I don't think we can name a specific client here, a specific SaaS company, but companies are starting to do that. They're starting to take this multi-model approach and then trade off and do trade-offs like that. Does that help?
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Any other questions? Thank you so much for
right here and right there.
Project.
There are different types of solutions, and some clients are implementing pointed solutions, while the way IBM has approached is more like a platform approach to have a comprehensive framework. And maybe if you can elaborate on how the new IBM Consulting Advantage is playing in that role to democratize and scaling AI for the greater good.
Okay. Should I talk to that one? Yeah, sure. Thanks for bringing that up. I'm glad you read like some press release on this stuff. So IBM Consulting Advantage is kind of like my baby, I guess. So I used to be a software guy, and now I'm in a consulting. And one of the things I quickly noticed is that, as I mentioned, we have 300 of these projects, and everybody's doing a little bit differently. Everybody's trying to figure out their own security. And so we built a layer called IBM Consulting Advantage that you could build your application on top. The Gen AI models sit at the bottom. There's this thing called an LLM adapter, so it adapts to like whatever LLM you want to use. But this Consulting Advantage layer provides kind of real-time security as you're issuing prompts against the LLMs. It's checking for bias, it's checking for PII, it's checking for GPL code if you're writing code. It does, the cost trade-off, et cetera. And so this is not a product we sell. This is just a thing we had to build because we're a consulting company and we have a lot of people doing a lot of things. But as we move forward with Gen AI at our clients, our mandate is everything has to be built on top of this because otherwise we just don't know, right? And I imagine in your own companies, you're struggling with the same sort of thing. I was talking to a bank the other day, and I don't know, they have like 30,000 coders, developers in this bank, and they're struggling with the same thing. So I think everybody's going to have to put in something like that. This is just our version of it that we use internally.
Hi, gentlemen. Yeah, my question is regarding confidential computing. Does that factor into some of the frameworks that you've presented here? I didn't see it. I didn't hear it mentioned. But given that we're talking about models that need to be secured, the environments also probably need to be secure as well, right? So I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
So yes, it will be, and it will be part of that infrastructure layer, okay, to start with. And then using confidential methodology and how we are doing the secure enclaves. Using those secure enclaves, you can secure the data and the models as well. So it's pretty much in the equation. We've just not explicitly mentioned it. We've kept it at a high level to define the framework. But if you need more information, we can certainly discuss it. Okay. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.